Alright, we're interviewing Mr. Toy Davison in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Birth date of January 23, 1924. Mr. Davison, if you want to talk about when you were drafted and what service you enlisted in and how the first couple of days seemed to you, if you remember.
Well, I was drafted in March, I guess I entered in March the 21st, I think, of 1943, and I was in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, was where I was inducted at, and then from there, then I went to Camp Robinson, Arkansas, and I don't know how long I was there in basic training, but probably 6 weeks. And then I went from there then to Texas, and I went through another basic training there, but I can't remember the name of the camp where I was at there. And then when I finished there, then I went to Camp House, Kentucky, Texas, which I joined the 103rd Division. I was in the 409th 103rd Division, Company B, and I was there then until we shipped out to go to New York to go overseas, and that was in August of '44, I think. But in March the 1st of 1944, I was on furlough, and my wife and I, we got married in Ohio at that time, and then she was with me when we was in Texas, and then when I left going to New York, well, she came back to Ypsilanti and went back to work, and she worked that time, and I went from there from New York to Marseille, France, by ship, and we was in a outpost camp or whatever you call it there, sleeping in pup tents for maybe a week or so, and then we moved up to the front lines to fight the Germans. And I can't remember any of that, even any of the towns that we fought through up there, but we was in quite a number of battles in there, captured a lot of German prisoners, and I was a first scout, and I'm out in the front of everyone else to be shot at, so they know where the enemy is, what it all amounted to, and then as we went on, I remember, this was one that I remember, it was just before Thanksgiving of 1944. We had a mission to go behind the German lines and cut several units of the Germans off. The only withdrawal, they had to get out, so we'd have them blocked off. And I remember it was awfully dark. They told us to not shoot our weapons as we were moving along, and I'm in the front of everyone, and it's quite dark. Everyone's awful close together. It's just a trail in the mountains. And I got tangled up in barbed wire entanglement. And so I didn't have any cutters to cut the wire with, so I had to walk back a little ways to the corporal, and he came up with me and had cutters, so we cut the wire in two. He took one out from on one side, and I moved it out from the other side. And just as we got this done, the Germans had this all set up there, and they had machine guns. So they opened fire on us right there, but we can't see anybody. All we can see is a flash of the guns and the bullets coming by. So everybody's on the ground crawling to get back away from that. And it was kind of rainy that night. So we spent the whole night, after we got back over a little ways, all we had in the way of cover to cover ourselves up with in the rain and cold was our raincoats. So we put our raincoats over us to try to sleep if we could sleep, which nobody didn't do much sleeping, I don't think. So then the next day, then we moved out from there, and we moved on, and we was way up on top of the mountains, and we could see over, we could see the Germans with their trucks and everything going in their business. They were, you know, quite a ways back behind their lines, because we'd already penetrated through the German lines. So then we got to our destination, and luckily my company approached this of going down the side of the mountain from the side where we approached the other company B and C and D went around, one from the head of this and the other on the other side, so we all closed in about, it was at their chow time when we moved in there. So we captured most everyone that was there, and one that wasn't captured, they was dead. And we lost quite a few men or staff there. And but anyway, we captured German doctors, and they was doctoring the wounded of the Germans and the Americans too. So they need blood plasma. So one sergeant, he volunteered to take 5 men, go back through the German lines, back into the through the American lines, and get blood plasma, and then go back through the lines and get back over there so they'd have the blood plasma. All of them got back safe. No one was injured in any way. They got back, so the Germans, he done the blood plasma and everything. And I know we were supposed to have a good turkey dinner when we got back, all the Tremens. Well, when we got back, the turkey had all spoiled. so we didn't have our turkey dinner. I remember that very well on Thanksgiving of 1944. So then from there we moved on through. There was another little town we went through that I remember that it stood out real well. We took the little town, and they had must have been church bells that they had. And just as we moved out of that little town and started up a dirt road, they opened fire on us with artillery. And I figured that was the bells was a signal that's where we was at. And we lost quite a few people, quite a few soldiers there. My platoon sergeant, he got hit in his right elbow and just splintered it up, blood pouring out of it. But he's on his feet after everything was over, because everybody bailed off into the ditch, and the water in the ditch. So we was in there for some time. After the shelling was all done, well, then we moved out and went on. And then I guess after the other places I remember was, it was after dark, and we were supposed to have tank support. And I understand that they got stuck in the mud and didn't get there. And there was a little river that run through the little town. I was in a building, but this, I don't know, I guess a machine gunner must have got killed, and I'd had experience with a machine gun, 30 caliber air-cooled machine gun. So I had the machine gun, still had my old N1 rifle also, but then I'm using this machine gun in a window of a building. And the only thing I could see after dark like this, when it would be on the other side of the river, I think where it was coming from, you could see the blaster there, and they'd have a tracer ever so often. So I'm shooting from this, or wherever I could see, across that river to where this fire was coming from. Well, all of a sudden I felt an awful sting in my right arm, and I thought it was a tracer bullet, but surely it wasn't. It hit my right arm, just splintered it all to pieces. Must have went right through the center of the bone. So I thought my arm had fell off. So I yelled for somebody. I guess the assistant must have took the machine gun, because anyway, I said, if anyone seen a medic? They said, yeah, I've seen him cross the road. So I got out of the building, I run across the road, and it's just all lit up. There's bullets. I don't know how I got by that without getting hit anymore. So I found the medic, and he gave me a morphine shot, but before he gave me the shot, he dropped the needle in the dark, and he says, this is the only one I have. And he's trying to cut my sleeve off and bandage my arm up, so he was going to do the best he could do. Well, he took a flashlight, so he covered up with a raincoat, and he found the needle. And he put it back in there, and he gave me the morphine shot. And that was the last thing that I had in any way of any medication or any painkiller or anything else. I laid there on the ground with the mortar shells coming in, and I couldn't even get up because I'd lost so much blood. So sometime during the night, a couple of the buddies, they came and got me up and walked me across this bridge. They helped me across. So I laid in I think it was probably the first building on the other side of the river, and it was we'd set up headquarters there, I think, what they had done. Anyway, I'm laying on the floor, so I had to go to the bathroom. So I tried to get up. I can't get up because of the blood I'd lost. I guess I was so weak. So I used my old steel helmet. Somebody threw that out, and anyway, he laid there till probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I heard tanks and half-tracks coming, and the first thing I knew after that, they had point blank with them 88 artillery shells had blown the whole side of that building out, right over me. And all this crap all over me, block and everything else. And I think I got cut maybe up over the eye a little bit there with a piece of that something that hit me there. So I don't know whether I got up then or whether my buddy got me up off of the floor and got me to the door. And there, the Germans are right at the door right there yelling. And I'm trying to tell them that I can't hold my right arm up. I've got my left arm up. And they helped me out. But an odd thing, this German soldier that took me right there, he was searching me, and I had a D-bar chocolate in my pocket, my jacket pocket. He pulled that out, and he looked at it, and I could understand that he said, "The chocolate." He broke it in about half, put the half back in my pocket, and eat the other half. I thought that was odd that he'd do that. So then they lined us up there. It's still dark, and we had to walk for a little ways. I don't know, I guess from all this excitement, somehow I gained more strength. Then we got to some place, and they put us on trucks, and they moved us on trucks back to the Rhine River. But on the way back to the Rhine River, there would be air raids 2 or 3 different times. Well, they would run us out of the trucks. These trucks had canvas cover over the truck, and they'd run us out and run us into a barn or something like that. Well, I'd jump out of that truck and hit the ground, and I had nothing on this arm because it was just all splintered, and the only thing I could do was poke my hand in my jacket, try to hold it together in there. You jump off of the truck. Well, I couldn't feel it hurt right then, but as soon as everything quieted down again, I surely had some pain coming after that. And then finally we get back to the Rhine River, and that day, and after dark, they ferried us across the river in just big boats. I don't know what, there was no vehicles. So we was in a little town there, I think we was in Germany. Well, it had to have been in Germany at that time. And they took a lot of the American prisoners out and marched around over the town. I've heard it was to build up German morale. I don't know. They didn't take me and 3 or 4 others that was wounded bad. They kept us in the building where we was at, and they give us a sandwich. And I could hardly eat the sandwich even though I was hungry, but I thought it was horse meat, and I don't know if it was or not. I had a problem eating that sandwich. But then we was there for about, I think, probably 2 days. So then they put us in boxcars, just like cattle. And I don't even know how many days. It might have been, I thought maybe it was even much as 2 weeks, but then I talked to my buddy later that was right in my outfit. I never met him till I went to a POW meeting over here 3 years ago. And he told me he was right with me all the time. And then I remembered his name. And we was captured together, but we was separated when we got all the way back into the POW camp. But during the time we was in these boxcars, it was cold, and we had almost nothing to eat at all, and no water. And the only thing we had for bathroom was something like 5-gallon jugs, or cans, sitting in there. And I don't think that everyone could even lay down at one time. Somebody would have to sit up. Well, it seemed like my arm would kind of maybe get set a little bit to where it would be real sore. and then somebody moved, and that moved that, and it hurt like crazy when they would do that. So on the way, my second, the second scout, he was, we bunked together and everything, and he could speak, well, he spoke several different languages. He speak in German. So we stopped on the railroad tracks. Now I don't know, the only thing I could see was trees outside, and they had the doors open, and he's standing in the doorway begging the Germans for food and water. They shot him right in the head. He fell out of the boxcar. I never seen him again after that, so I don't know what happened to him after that. His name was Paul, I can't think of his last name right off now. His first name was Paul. I can't think of his name. I know, but I just can't think of it. Maybe I'll think of it later. And anyway, we must have been in them boxcars for probably a week, I don't know. So we get back to the first POW camp, which is Stalag 12A, and they said everyone had to be showered and deloused. And since my arm was the way it was, I was trying to figure out a way to stay out of the shower, and then to have the dope put on there for the lice. So in the meantime, they took me into what they called a hospital. It was just like a barracks with a straw on wire bunks, is what they called a hospital. And English doctor, I seen him, I think that night, and he didn't have plaster of Paris, but he used wire. It somehow that he wound that around and tied it to kind of hold it together. My arm was all in pieces because there was nothing left there. And that stayed on there for probably 4 or 5 days, and then he got plaster of Paris through the American Red Cross, and then he made me a cast which had come down, just covered the elbow and then up to here with a big hole in the back for it to drain, because there was a big hole in the back of my arm there and it was draining real bad. And he put that cast on there, and I don't even know how long I was in there. It must have been the rest of all the rest of December. But during this time, every day, it seemed that the American big bomber planes was going over right over that camp, and then later on in the afternoon you could hear the rumble of the bombs falling. And then at night, the British was bombing. And this one particular night, the air raids sounded, planes approaching, then they get closer, and then overhead. And then it sounded 3 blasts, all clear, after a period of time. So everything's gone now. And all of a sudden I heard planes, and about the time I heard the planes, I heard bombs coming down. And it was the British that was bombing, but it was by mistake, and I don't know whether it was because they dropped a flare where the bombs are supposed to be dropped and the wind blew it where it happened to go over the camp or what it was, but anyway, there was a number of bombs that fell, because I know I rolled off into the floor, and I had a blanket, and I covered myself the best I could with a blanket, and it blew the cement block wall right all over my bunk where I got out of. It hit me. I got cut. That time I got cut in the head. I got my big toe. I almost cut my big toe off. Got it in pretty deep. But then, but one of them bombs fell a direct hit on the officers' barracks, American officer POW barracks. And I was told later that there was only 6 survived out of the whole barracks. They was all killed except this 6. And I don't know. I don't remember whether they took that cast off of there before they moved me or not. But when they got ready to move us out, they was going to move us to Stalag 2B. I think is where where it was going. We didn't know where it was, but I think it ended up to be 2B. Which was back in the boxcars again. But they put us on the boxcars, in them boxcars again, and the British was bombing and strafing that night, and they seemed like they was coming right down into the top of them cars where we was at. So we sit there all night long listening to this going on, and it seemed like they was bombing and strafing all night long where we was at. So the next day, the Germans take it back out of that and put us back in and another place, and there all they had was just a little straw and cement floor. So we was there a day or so, and then they put us back on there again. That's when we went to the Stalag 2B, and I don't even know how long I was there, but the whole time all we was getting to eat was, if we was lucky, we get a little slice of that sawdust bread, and maybe a few times out of this whole time I get a grass soup. And the grass soup, even when you're almost starving, you could hardly eat it, drink it. It's just almost nothing but just bitter soup. I think they mowed the hay and boiled it, and that was what they called soup. And the bread, they tell me anyway that it was 50% sawdust and then mixed between rye and wheat flour to make the bread. I know it was hard, and I've seen them when they hauled it on a wagon, and the driver sat up on it just like he's sitting on wood that was on a wagon. That's how hard it was. And that they hauled it with horses or mules or whatever they had. I think it's horses mainly. And so I don't know how long I was there then, but it would have had to have been in probably the middle of March of 2005 that they took us out of that camp. Now I thought that I could hear artillery falling at that time, and it would have had to have been the Russians, and I think maybe they moved us out of there so that the Russians wouldn't liberate us and take us. And we was on the road just marching for, well, you might call it a death march, because they would say if you fall out and you can't keep going, you will be beat with a rifle butt. And if you don't get up and go, we'll shoot you and you'll lay wherever you're at. We'll kill you at where you're at in the road. And I don't even know, there was hundreds of us that was moved out of there. And that was the conditions we was marching. And there was one guy that I had got acquainted with. I think he was from Texas, and he'd been shot in the leg, and his legs was getting in awful bad shape. I know I spent a few days while we were walking, marching, or whatever you would call it, that one guy would be on one side of him and the other guy on the other side, and I spent quite a bit of time holding his hand and the other guy so that he could hop and keep going, and that's the conditions that we was marching under. Then at night they'd run the cattle out of the barns, and that's where they put us so they could guard us. And then one time I remember they put us in the barn, and there was a hayloft in it. And when the next morning, when they lined us up, well, they started counting. They went by numbers, you know, how many POWs they had. Well, they was short, I think 6 guys. They couldn't find them. They was 6 short. And someone said at that time that they said that they was going to take the first 6 in line, and they was going to shoot them if they didn't find the other ones. I was one of the 6. They found them and brought them out and got them back in the line. So, you know, at this point, you wonder, is it even worth living or not? Of course, you just can't give up. You just have to keep on thinking, well, I got a wife back home, and I got to keep going. So that's probably what kept me going pretty much, because I knew that she was home, and I had very doubts if she even knew where I was, and she didn't. All she knew that I was missing in action for almost the whole time that I was there. And I've got letters that shows when the letters that she received, and she didn't know where I was at till I think probably I was liberated, before she ever knew where I was even living, because all she knew that I was missing. So finally we got to an old granary. I think that's what it was, and they put us in this granary, and we stayed in there for I think 2 or 3 days, and then they said they was going to take us to an open city where there would be no fire at all. So they started marches, and by this time we didn't have very many guards left, and some of the guys figured it was time to escape and get away because they could get away. But I thought, well, I'm staying with the group because I'm going to trust them that we will be liberated soon. So we was out in an open field coming into this little town, and these P-51s and P-38 little planes, they started coming. Of course, we all laid on the ground. And I didn't know what was going on. I found out later that they used blankets and made POW that they, and I know artillery was going over us. I could hear the artillery shells whistling as they go over, and they was going into this little town. And these little planes, it seemed like they would circle, and every time they'd circle around, I'm laying there looking up, and I thought, well, they're going to strafe us this time, because when they get over, they would come down and they'd strafe that little town as they come down, and then when they get down, they had a bomb under each wing. They drop them bombs, and then they pull up and they go. And I don't know how many of them. This went on for probably a couple hours. I don't know. It was quite a long time. So after everything had all cleared and we moved out, we went through that little town. There wasn't much of it left, I'll tell you. It was mostly gone. So we went another 2 or 3 miles, I guess, and they put us in another barn, and they said the Americans would be there the next day. So about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, tanks, trucks, so on, they come in. There wasn't a shot fired. They rolled in there, and they sure did look wonderful to see them coming in. And so they took the guards that we had as prisoners. Of course, they was interested. They was practicing throwing their weapon and holding their hands up, because they were pretty tired of it. The German guards that we had by this time, what few of them was left. So then they walked us into another little town, and I think the Germans, they have they'll be a little town, and then they have farms around that, I think, is the way they worked at that time. So we went there, and they took the civilians out and moved them. They went to neighbors, and we got in, and that's the first bed that we'd slept in, and the whole time since I'd been captured. Well, even before I ever left New York, there wasn't a bed after that. And I told the guys, I said, well, we had nice sheets and everything. We slept, and I said, well, everybody make their bed now when we get up tomorrow morning, because we're leaving. And as far as I know, everyone made their bed. We made pancakes for breakfast. Well, that was the wrong thing to do, because we hadn't eaten anything in so long. Then they put us on their GI truck, American trucks, old 6x6s, to take us to an airport from there. Well, they would stop at least every hour, maybe oftener than that. But there was a lot of guys hanging over that tailgate, I'll tell you, after what they'd eat. They couldn't wait to get to a field for a break. So finally then we get to the airport, and I don't know, we must have been there for at least a week before we finally got on a plane to fly back, and then we flew back to Le Havre, France, where they had the cigarette camps, Lucky Strike and Camels and Marlboro. I don't know what all the brands was. I don't even remember what the name of the camp was where I was at. So some of the guys, they got passes and went into Paris. I said, I'm not going in case that ship leaves here. I'm going to be on that. So I stuck right around there all the time, but we eat good there, because we had fried chicken a lot and so on, which we couldn't eat a whole lot, but anyways, doing good. So finally come time to leave, and then we got on a lot smaller boat coming back. So they asked for volunteers for KP, for the officers' mess hall. So I volunteered for that. They said, you only be 4 hours at a time. So that worked out good. And then we got to eat in the officers' mess hall. They had a little better food than we did, even in the States. So I made out good there. So then we landed in Oglethorpe, Virginia. Virginia Beach, Virginia, I guess is where we landed there. And then it was on a troop train there then to Chicago, to the Fort Sheridan, Illinois. And I was only there for 2 or 3 days. See, that was in, well, I don't know, it must have been in last of April maybe, or it might have been the 1st of May of '45. So when I left from there, just a little bit of processing there, they sent us home. Anyway, they said, we'll let you know when and where to report. Well, I came back home, so my wife and I, we rented a little apartment over on River Street here in Ypsilanti. And so we lived there then, and I kept waiting and waiting for orders, so it went along about 46 days before I ever heard anything. And I thought, well, maybe they forgot me. And they said, we'll notify you, so I just waited. So I get the orders, and the total that I think was 62 days till I was to report in Miami Beach, Florida. So I went down there, and I thought, this is nice here in the hotel. Well, that only lasted for about 3 days, and I started my physicals and everything in there. Then they took me to the Coral Gable, to the hospital, I guess the Veteran Hospital there, anyways, GI hospital at that time. And I'm there for, I don't know, must have been over a month. And in the process of having tubes run down my throat and pumping and everything else, and trying to find out, I guess, and I never did find out what they was doing for me at that point. They're there. So finally they sent me back to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. So as soon as I landed there, I called my wife and I says, come down, I'll have a place to live time you get here. So I started looking for an apartment. I found a little one-room apartment in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is close. Bus went from there into Fort Oglethorpe. And I would go in of a morning, stay in roll call, and then if they didn't call my name or anything, I'd just go back home, and we'd spend, the whole day till the next morning. I did that probably for a week, or maybe, I don't know, it might have even been longer than that. Well, finally they said, call my name, get your equipment, fall out in the street, you're being transferred. So I go in and get my duffel bag and everything, fall out in the street. They march us 2 or 3 blocks. Okay, here's your new home right here. You're assigned here to this base. So then I was there, and I was a runner there, getting papers and so on. They furnished me a bicycle to ride there, and I'd like to be a lot of emergency for leaves, for sick and so on. And I was running around to getting them all signed and taken care of, to where that they could get out and get home for their leave. And then about once a week I'd have to pull CQ. I'd have to spend all night in the orderly room answering the phone and so on. But the rest of the time I go home at night, be with my wife at night, and I go back the next morning. So finally they said, well, you're going to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, we're going to discharge you. So my wife and I, we got the train, we bought her ticket, and they furnished mine to get to Fort Sheridan to Chicago. And then when we got to Chicago, then she came on to Ypsi, and I went into the camp there. And I think I was there about 3 days, and they discharged me. It was on the 8th day of December of 1945. So I got on a train there. They said, well, the train won't stop in Ypsilanti. I said, well, Ann Arbor. They don't stop in Ann Arbor either. It stops in Jackson. I said, well, I'll take a ticket to Jackson, and then I'll hitchhike the rest of the way to Ypsilanti. So when I got on the conductor, and I said, don't this train stop in Ypsilanti? No, it stops in Ann Arbor, though. I said, can I get a ticket to go on from Jackson to Ann Arbor? Oh, yeah. So I paid him. So I got off of the train in Ann Arbor, and I thought, well, I'll just walk over to the bus station. It wasn't very far over there. So I walked over there. There wasn't another bus leaving coming to Ypsi that night. So I thought, well, I'll just walk till I get out. So I get my duffel bag on my back, and I started down this sidewalk, and I hadn't got a half a block. This young couple stopped, and they said, where are you going? Ypsilanti. Get in. That's where we're going. We're going right through there. So I got in the car, and we talked, and when we come on, and they let me off on Michigan Avenue and Prospect. He said, I'll take you on home. I was going to East Forest Avenue at the time. That's where my wife was, staying with her folks there. And I said, no, I'm close now, I can make it fine. So I walked on home, and it's probably 2 o'clock in the morning by the time I got there. So then I went back to work then on the 12th day of December at King Sealy Corporation. I didn't have much vacation time, so I went back to work. And so we lived there in an apartment there on 944 East Forest for, well, from 45, well, December 45 till the summer of 49, and I bought a little house out on Ford Boulevard from my brother, and he moved back to Tennessee. And so we moved in there, and I fixed it all up, and And then we already had the one child, one daughter at that time. So we lived there for about 2 years, and then we bought a house on White Street. We moved there, and we spent 32 years there as I worked at King Sealy Corporation. Then I went back, when I went back to work, I had the same job that I had before I left, went into service, even though they had changed names. It was Central Specialty when I left, and it was King Sealy when I came back, but they took me right back with the seniority and everything that I had. And I worked there till 1965, and they closed down and sold out the motor wheel. So then I went to Ford Motor Company. In the meantime, while I was at King Sealy, I applied for an electrician's job, and so I got that, and I got my journeyman's card, and then I had no problem then getting a job at Ford Motor Company. So I went to Ford Motor Company in the November the 1st of 1965, and I worked there through 1983, and I retired from Ford Motor Company the first day of February of 1984, and that's when we moved up to Mount Pleasant. And we was up there then until we moved back right here to this spot. That's just about it. I don't know what else.
Well, back to your time as a POW, how long were you, do you remember that?
How long as a POW? Well,
long were you
it
spent
was
as a
almost
POW?
5 months, because it was the first day of December. I didn't know that until I finally found it in some records. And also when I went to a POW meeting, this Richard Johnston, and I told him I was in Company B, 409, 103rd Division, and he's sitting down a little ways, and he held his hand up and he says, "I want to talk to you after the meeting, okay?" So he said, "I was right with you the whole time," and then I remembered the name. And I think possibly he was the one that got me up out of the building to get me to the door. And if I hadn't have got up, they would have probably run a bayonet through me when they came in. Yeah. If you're laying there, you don't know what would happen. But I think that he was possibly the one, because I asked him later. I was talking to him later, and he says, "I helped a guy out, but I don't know who it was." He said he had his right arm was all busted to pieces, and I was holding him with his left hand till I got him to the door. And I said, "It had to be you, because it would have had to been the two of us. It couldn't have been anyone else, I don't think." With that, and I had forgot all about that, for all these years.
You met him right around here. Was that a local POW meeting?
Yeah, it's out here in Ann Arbor, the VA hospital in Ann Arbor. And I would have never went to that if I hadn't known. When my wife got the Alzheimer's, and then I had the bypass surgery, and I had to apply for something in order to get Medicaid, because I couldn't afford it without it. And they only paid for 2.5 months after all anyway, before I run out of money. And but that's when I went in for an interview at over at the VA. They gave me a complete physical. They took X-rays, and that was the first X-ray that I ever had of that arm, that they took over to the VA hospital in Ann Arbor, the new VA there, and that was in 2002. Was the first X-ray that I ever had, or it might have been. Yeah, it was 2002, and I told her, I said, well, it was busted in awful bad shape, and I thought I was going to lose it for all time, and probably the only reason I didn't lose it was because of being in cold weather all time, because we had no heat at any time. It was just, we went through that winter with no heat, and not too many clothes either. And but she came back and out and told me before I left, when she took the X-ray, she says, "You surely did have that splintered up in there, but it's healed up and it really looks good." And I've used it after I finally got it straightened out. I couldn't use it for a long time, but I finally kept working till I got it straightened out. So I've used it all these years in pretty good shape. But I get pains in it once in a while, maybe arthritis, I don't know from that. But of course I've got up to 81 years old now, so I'm still going, so I don't know how much longer.
I'm seeing in there. So was your whole unit that you were on that original scout trip taken as POWs that weren't
I understand
casualties?
in a book that I got from the 103rd Division, I don't even know where it came from, but it was left up to Mount Pleasant when we moved from up there. But it stated in there that it was only 6, and I don't know whether I think that was probably just from my company. There was only 6 that escaped that, and they got into this river and floated down the river to get away when the rest of us was captured. The rest of it, we really didn't have a chance because they came in with tanks and half-tracks and all that. And the only thing I could think of was after they blowed the wall out, ordinarily you would think they would open up with machine gun fire from that with either 30 or 50 caliber machine gun or whatever the Germans, their size is. But they didn't. It was just the artillery that came in, and that's all they did. And when we come out, them tanks and half-tracks out there, huge things, and we were out there, right there with them. And of course they were searching us. They had us all lined up there. I don't know if it was any more than my company that was in there or not. I don't remember. Or at that time, the whole time there, my time, I didn't realize too much of what was going on. The only thing that I realized when I was taken by the Germans and how awful this is, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know when you're going to die, and how long you're going to be there. You don't know anything that's going to happen, and it's just it's a terrible feeling. You're helpless. You can't do anything. Because at one time when I think probably right after the cast came off of my arm, that they had us moving like picnic tables or something. And I'm trying to do the best I can with one hand because this arm is stiff then and I can't use it at all. And there was a German officer with them old hard boots. He walked up and kicked that arm right in that same spot. And I thought for sure he had broke it, but evidently it didn't do anything to it other than just hurt. But he kicked me all the way up there, and I'm standing up. That's how high he got his leg up. I think he was a lieutenant that kicked me.
How was the treatment by the Germans? If you remember much of it, I mean, it was very.
The one thing they was awful handy. If you was out of line, just if you're lined up and you're a little bit out of line, and of course they're yelling, you don't know what they're saying. They're awful handy with a rifle butt. They didn't think anything at all about hitting you in the ribs or in the shoulder or something like that with a rifle butt. They was really handy. I remember one time when we was on this march, there was a guy just a little ways ahead of me, and of course I know everyone is so thirsty. You drink out anything. There was a little stream of water running down the ditch. He had a tin cup. He run over and he dipped that in that water, and he got a cup of water, and he run back in line. But this before he got back in the line, this guard took the barrel of his rifle and hit him right in the back and broke the stock right off of it. His stock fell off of the barrel. But the guy never lost his water. He got back in line and drank his water. That's how thirsty he was. It's terrible when you get thirsty and you go for days without any water at all.
So all they gave was just the sawdust bread?
That sawdust bread, and once in a while that grass soup, they call it.
Were you able to receive any of the Red Cross kits besides the time that
there was
not
about very often. Once in a while, we might get one of them Red Cross partials, and I think sometimes that they broke it down into take one parcel and make it into 4. But when we left on this march, I think that they give us a whole partial, because I remember at that time I keep thinking, I need to have my arm straightened out because I can't bend it down very far, and I would carry that with my right hand with that weight till it get to hurting so bad that I couldn't stand it any longer. Then I'd take it back in my left hand, and I think, I'm not sure that it was a whole parcel or not. Well, that still isn't. Yeah. You wouldn't have 2 good meals out of it. Of course, you make it last. When you don't know when you're going to get any more, you try to make it last. The water, you get more thirsty. It bothers you more than the hunger. After a while, you get to where you're not really hungry. It's just that you feel empty and you need something to eat and you're weak. But to me, anyway, it didn't seem to bother me as much being hungry as it was being thirsty. Yeah. And of course, you can't. Seldom would ever find enough water to even wash your hands in. They had water in the place where they called it the hospital there, in between. I guess it must have been a German barracks at one time, but they had a washroom in the middle of that. But that don't help you much if they don't turn the water on. But almost every morning, if you went and looked in there, you would see anywhere from 1 to 5 dead bodies laying in there, and somebody had to bury them.
Mhm.
It was one of the POWs said later, he's dead now, he's near Detroit. And he said that hurt him more than anything else. That was what he had to do, bury the dead. And he said that's really a terrible thing. It really sticks with you, of burying the dead. Because, you know, I don't think that they didn't have any kind of a box. I'm sure they just dug a hole and thrown them in there. And you wonder if some of them, if they ever even knew whatever happened to them. That's probably where a lot of them that never showed up from being in action, and they never know. Not like my buddy there that they shot on that out in the boxcar. His parents never. I don't know if any dog tags was ever sent to him or anything or any other way that they would ever know what happened to him. He may still just be missing in action. I don't know.
Now, when you were in captivity for it, were you able to converse and talk much between each other?
Yeah, the ones of us who was right in there together. Yeah, we could talk.
Yeah.
But see, there wasn't anyone that I knew other than, you know, you get acquainted and like that. You get acquainted most everyone pretty fast. I know there was a guy. He was really old to be in the service. I think he was probably 38 or 39, maybe even 40 years old, and he was in the bunk, just like at my feet on the neck, so there's a little aisle between. And my bunk was a double bunk, so there's someone on the top, and I was in the bottom bunk of it. But where he was at, there was only the one. And he had both arms was broke, both legs was broke in several places. He had a big hole in his back. He couldn't feed himself. He couldn't do anything at all. Somebody had to feed him. They had to do everything for him. And this was all done from the other GIs. They could get around to, to take care of him. And I do a little bit occasionally like that with one hand, and I finally got to where I could do a little bit to help. And he was laying right there on his back when they British bombed, and all that straw-like ceiling come down. And just, it was a mess in there. It was all over him, covered him up. But he never got hurt. And he said later, when he got to where he could talk, and before I left from there, he could feed himself. So I don't know if he pulled through the whole thing or not. Maybe, but possibly he did, because he was getting better. And he said that 2 or 3 times, he said the Germans would take him, and then the Americans get him, but they never could get back far enough till finally the Germans got him back to leave us a POW. And he said at one time they had him on an old wooden ladder, and they shot the ladder underneath him. That's where he got the back. It cut the ladder in two, wooden ladder in two, and then evidently that's when it knocked a big hole in his back. I don't know if it was in the spine. You would think it would be, because I think it was right in the middle of his back. Wow. And we only had that one doctor, that English doctor, and then later on I think there was a American POW that was in there too, but each GI had to kind of take care of the other, whatever there was, the one that could get up and move around to do anything.
Well, how large of a group were you usually total, if you can recollect, throughout the time? I mean, it must have varied, but
yeah, in that barracks, I don't know. It would be like in a hospital ward, I guess. I don't know. Probably, there's probably 50, maybe. I'm not sure. Probably about 50 in the one barracks right there. See, we couldn't even go outside at any time there. You could look out the windows and see. That's where I could see out and see the planes. But in the second camp where I was at, occasionally we could go outside. But when you went outside, there was machine guns on all 4 corners with high barbed wire fences. You didn't have them. There was no chance. But the Russians was outside of there. They could go into town.
The Russians could go into town?
Yeah, the Russians go into town. They could go into town and buy things if they had any money to buy it with, and come back. Wow. They didn't want to go back to Russia. Because I've been told afterwards the reason why that this was, that I couldn't figure it out because English and Americans was in here together. And the Russians, if they've been captured and they went back, if they got taken back into Russia, Stalin would have them shot. They'd shoot them. And the officers, I think it was maybe the officers that they would send to Siberia, was where they'd send them if they'd been, because they wasn't supposed to be captured. They were supposed to fight till they die. There's no surrender.
That's
'Cause this one POW over here, he said that he was liberated by the Russians, and he says he was held in Russia, and he began to think he never was going to get out of there because the Russians wanted to exchange the Americans for the Russian prisoner POWs, and the POWs didn't want to come back.
They wanted to exchange them with Germany?
No. They wanted to exchange the American POWs had been liberated by the Russians, and they wanted to exchange them with the Russian POWs that Germans had. And this was probably after the war was over. I don't know, it was right along in that area sometime, and they say anyway that they didn't want to go back to Russia because they knew they was going to be shot if they got back.
So now, do you still attend any of the POW meetings
yes,
or any of the reunions
yeah.
and the veterans?
Yeah,
still active?
last Thursday we had one. Yeah, last Thursday. I'm pretty sure it was last Thursday. It's the second Thursday of each month we have a meeting, and I don't miss very many of them. I get most all of them.
All right. Well, why don't we end this here? It's been close to an hour. Interview was on, what's the date today?
Yeah, today is the 22nd.
Today is
Four.
April 22nd,
Yeah, April.
2005. Interviewing Mr. Toy Davison, and my name is Tim Weber.